Guys, I'm sure you didn't know, but did you know that recon is one of the most important elements in strategy games? You must first locate the enemy and then keep track of what they are doing. If you can immediately locate and destroy enemy expansion towns... You know about those expansion towns? You gotta locate and destroy them. And then consistently meet your opponent's forces with counter forces, victory will be assured. And on that topic, that's what I want to do a little soapbox on. Someone asked me about, is the unit counter system in Warcraft 3 a rock, paper, scissors counter system? And to that I say, no, you must meet your opponent's forces with counter forces. And which counter forces are appropriate to meet the opponent's forces, I'm about to tell you now. So let's look at the units that there are. Normal human units. Okay, let's talk about how to counter human with every race. Peasants, spells are effective, and while they're in peasant form, they have medium armor type. You want to have normal attack damage, which deals 50% bonus damage on medium. So grunts, ghouls, abominations, knights, torrents, these are all very effective against peasants. Whereas archers and fiends aren't as effective, but they're still just peasants. Militia gain heavy armor, which means you should attack them with magic damage, which deals bonus damage. So that includes destroyers, frostworms, chimera, druids of the talon. Not spells, by the way, just magic type damage. Witch doctors, shamans, spirit walkers, these types of units will do well against militia. And you want to avoid militia with raiders, generally, until they're very well upgraded, or you have high hero levels, in which case the high hero levels kill the militia. Footmen. Footmen are very difficult to kill with the defend upgrade with piercing attacks, like fiends, riflemen, archers, and headhunters. Try to focus, if you're ever microing against an archmage, water elementals, and footmen, and you have a mostly ranged army, you want to have your heroes and summons, like wolves or skeletons, attack footies, and you want to have your fiends or headhunters attack water elementals. Water elementals have heavy armor and will take normal amounts of damage from piercing. When footies don't have defense upgrades, you can kill them with anything, and they are mostly seen as obsolete units. Yeah, generally you don't attack the hero because heroes have hero armor, and that takes reduced damage from piercing and from many other types of attacks. And heroes are most microed, so even if you bring a 100% HP hero to 10%, it gains you control of the fight, but you didn't gain anything yet, in a sense. You didn't kill anything. Think of it like this. You could kill 3 footies while trying to kill a Mountain King, but you kill 1 footie, now they have less DPS. You kill 2nd footie, now they have less DPS, and you gain experience, and you gain guaranteed result. And then when you kill the 3rd footie, you get the 3rd footie, or you would have killed MK if you only focused MK. But you're getting these tiered rewards of 1st footie, 2nd footie, and then finally 3rd footie. So if you think you've got the reach to kill MK, that is preferable. But if you're microing an even fight, generally you focus units over heroes, because you get that kill threshold and its associated reward more quickly. Riflemen are theoretically countered by grunts, ghouls, footies, and huntresses, but they're so sturdy and have good range and are generally well supported that for riflemen, the tier 3 heavy unit is generally more appropriate. Torrents counter rifles with no micro, but with micro and support, Torrents aren't the go-to counter per se against rifles. But Knights are extremely good against rifles because they have a little bit more movement speed, insane damage type versus rifles. Abominations are really good because they're generally backed up by Unholy Aura, and Disease Cloud helps a lot against Rifle Priest. So you can go Abominations with hero spells to take on rifles. You can go Ghouls if they don't have high level Thunderclap, because they're nice and fast with Frenzy, but you'll need Heal Scroll and Micro. Grunts somewhat counter rifles if you have Lockdown, generally through Shamans with Purge, and then you can add Lightning Shield. And you can also make your own ranged units, in which case neither of you are really countering each other. Archers with Orb of Venom support. Mountain Giants are of course very good against rifles. You can go headhunters against rifles, in which case he has a bit more range, but you have a bit more DPS, so it depends on positioning. And then hero spells that lock them down are very good, like Impale, War Stomp, even Thunderclap are all very good against rifles. Knights are fast, tanky, and high damage. They are best dealt with air, like Destroyers, Frostworms, Chimera. They can somewhat be dealt with caster units, like Shaman, Witch Doctor, Walker, Necromancer, Banshee. But generally, you counter them with special things, like Frostworm with the slow and the high damage. Kodo Beast, that can eat them. It's 4 food each. Knight costs about the same as a Kodo, so every one Kodo can eat one Knight. Problem is, the remaining Knights, if you don't eat them all, can free the others. But it's perfectly fine to have a couple of Kodos to deal with small Knight numbers, but you can't keep up the arms race. You wouldn't want 10 Kodo against 10 Knight. You'd rather have 3 Grunt, 2 Kodo, 2 Raiders for lockdown, not for direct fight, and then some Spirit Walkers to do the real damage on Knights. Right, so a varied army is generally good. Same with Undead. Undead can put 1 or 2 A-bombs for tanking. Then a bunch of Fiends to web Flyings. Destroyers to kill Knights. Kind of like that. And you'll need Orb of Corruption and Frost Nova to lock them down. Frost Armor is quite useful against Knights. Priests are generally countered by Piercing, so any ranged unit with Piercing attack will work. Same with Sorceresses. You'll need Dispel for Inner Fire and Slow, which is generally done through Destroyers for Undead, Disenchant for Walkers. You can go Fairy Dragon, is quite good against Sorc Priest for the Mana Flare, and even if you mask them with Piercing, if there's no Rifles or Flyings, or indeed any counter to Fairy Dragons. Spellbreakers. Spellbreakers are magic immune, but you can ensnare them, you can Lightning Orb Purge them, you can still Orb of Venom them for damage. They have medium armor, which means they're resilient to piercing attacks like Archer, Rifle, Headhunter. But you can still use piercing attack to focus them down, because you got the range advantage. They have 3 armor, makes them pretty tanky. Theoretically, Spellbreakers are countered by Ghoul, Grunt, Huntress. And it's true, you wouldn't make Spellbreakers against Huntress. But generally, because Spellbreakers are magic immune, they take no magic spell damage or lockdown damage from heroes. No Nova, no Impale, no War Stomp, no Chain Lightning, but Grunts do. And if Sorceresses are backing up the Breakers, it doesn't matter if you've got positive damage type of Grunts against Breakers, because he will slow your Grunt and then kite them, and even if a Breaker drops to 20% life, he can pull it back and heal it up with Priest. Meanwhile, Grunts are dying one by one because they're bolted, bashed, slowed, and whatnot. Still, Grunts are good to mix in against Breakers. You want Ensnare as well to prevent them from running away. For Undead, you can just go Mass Fiend with Orb of Corruption. That will chew through them. Nothing special needed. You won't have Lockdown, but you can just attack them and kill them. They die very fast against Orb of Corruption. Night Elf likewise. Mountain Giant is okay. Bear is okay. Archer is okay. You wouldn't want to deal with Spellbreakers. Dryads are okay, by the way. Almost everything Night Elf has is okay against Breakers. You'll still see humans make Breakers sometimes against Night Elf to help tank against Bears. Dryads do slow down Breakers, so it takes away some of that mobility that Breakers enjoy due to their magic immunity. So Dryads are good support. They also drop Spellbreaker damage, which also removes their feedback special ability, which is mana sap and mana burn. So generally a varied army will do okay. You want to avoid making Banshee with Curse, Shaman with Bloodlust, because they'll steal it. That's their main niche, but they're a pretty good all-purpose unit. Flying machines are countered with Bats and super heavy air, like Chimera. You can also make a mixture of Talons and Hippogriffs. They will destroy Flyings if the numbers aren't too big. For Orc, it's pretty much don't make Wind Riders against Flyings, ever. Even Wind Rider Bat will not deal with Flyings. Just if human has Flyings as Orc, do not go air, period. Except if it's like team games and you want to help an ally clear the air, then you just mass Bats. Undead can counter small amounts of flying with destroyers that still have mana, but after that destroyers get owned. Worms will do fine. Garks do get ran generally. Mortar teams are dealt with generally via spells and heroes. That's true for almost all races. Because of their range and their ability to hurt medium armor unarmored quite well, you want to deal with them with heroes. So for Orc, that's Windwalk your blade in, have Lightning Orb, have Invul Potion, and then you just start hitting them. You can kill 2 under the effects of lesser Invulnerability Potion. Shockwave Chain Lightning will do fine. Chain Lightning, Lightning Shield, War Stomp will do fine. Of course, theoretically, Grunts and Raiders counter Mortars, but because they're at the back, protected by support units, generally Mortar teams will need to be dealt with via heroes, in my experience. Wind Riders theoretically counter Mortars, but then you have Wind Riders. And because they have Mortars, they have a Workshop. And because they have Workshop, they can make flyings, and that will invalidate your Wind Riders. Griffins and Siege Engines. Let's talk about Siege Engines. You counter them via Raiders as Orc. Pretty much just Raiders. Alright? They're the #1 counter. You don't need anything else for them. So that ends that book. Night Elf deals with Siege Engines via Ancients of War, Mercenary Camp, Mud Golem support, Bears, and more Ancient of War, and Nature's Blessing. Right? So you can say like, oh, you know, glaive throwers. A couple of glaive throwers if they're really serious about it. Not wrong to have 1 or 2 glaives, perhaps 1 glaive per base. But you can't just go glaive. Like, let's say you're playing Bears, and they got an expansion, and it's towered, and you haven't been able to take it down, and now they're going Siege Engines. You can't just go 2 glaives, because their Archmage Mountain King Pala will run at your glaive and kill it. That's why it's much more reliable to have Magic Immune Mud Golem Slow, that reduces their damage. If you have an Ancient of Wind, perhaps because you dealt with a Zeppelin before, with 1 Hippogriff, you can make 1 or 2 Talents. Fairy Fire and Slow are very useful spells to put on Siege Engine to help dealing with them. And then you want to have lots of Ancients of War because they don't take up any food. That means that sometimes you can even play lower upkeep than you otherwise would be because Ancient of War don't take food. You can have 4 per base and they're just uprooted and standing, and they do good damage to Siege Engines. Then you have Griffin Riders. Oh, Siege Engines by human. Well, humans will deal with it via Mortars, pretty much. Mortars and Knights. And Undead deals with them with Ghouls, Ghoul Frenzy, some Nerubian to slow their attack and their movement. Orb of Corruption, of course, if you have it and you're near. And Meat Wagons. So Undead will go Meat Wagon. And they're a little bit more well protected than Glaives because Undead base has more lockdown. All the slows that they have. So 5 to 7 Ghouls per base. 1 to 2 Meat Wagons per base, and that's how you protect against Siege Engines as Undead. Griffin Riders. Night Elf will do Dryads, because they're literally unattackable by Griffins, and they slow them, which is nice lockdown. Orb of Venom is key. Hippogriffs. Dryad Hippogriff would be your main unit combo to deal with Griffins. Slow them down, good damage, kill them. Right? Try not to go archers because Griffins, generally they creep very fast, which means they level up the human heroes very fast. That means if you're thinking of doing an arms race, for every 1 Griffin you make, I make 2 archers. 4 archers against 2 Griffins is fine-ish. But if you go 20 archers against 10 Griffins, you'll lose because there'll be Flame Strike, Blizzard, Clap, Stormbolt, and whatnot. And you can't do the same to Griffins with spells as what they can do to archers. So don't start by trying archers. It's the same for Orc. You can have a couple of Headhunters with a couple of Raiders to deal with initial Griffins. For instance, 2 to 4 Griffins can be countered by a Kodo, 2 Raiders, and 6 Berserkers. Right? But when they have 10 Griffins, you cannot counter Griffins anymore via ground as Orc. Like, you just can't. Dragonhawk Riders. Orc deals with them via Raider, Headhunter, Kodo plus Caster. Don't need Bats, don't need Wyverns. Just Berserkers, Raider, Kodo, and some Casters. Dragonhawk Riders Human deals with them via flyings, extremely hard counter. Siege engines counter them as well, and Tinker rockets are quite good against them. You can play Rifle Priest as well, and then you'll need some towers to prevent harassment, I suppose. Not too many, because Cloud shuts it down. Night Elf deals with Dragonhawk Riders. Actually, there's a valid build with Dragonhawks against Night Elf. But you have to overwhelm Night Elf very quickly. If Night Elf open with Demon, it's particularly good. Orb of Venom will help against it. And then they need to get Dryads. But Dryads take bonus damage from Hawks, even though they do bonus damage to Hawks as well. So it's a numbers game. So the only way that Dragonhawks against Night Elf like this works usually is if Human fast expands, but Elf is unable to get one because Human constantly suicides all their footies on the Tree of Life, cancel, kill, and yeah. And on equal pop, Dragonhawks will not work against Night Elf, but if you try to overwhelm, it can be. So Night Elf will try to get some Archers, some Dryad, maybe Archer, Dryad, Hippo, even though Hippo gets shackled, but now the enemy Hawk is also shackled because he's stationary, which means you can focus it down with Archer, Dryad. But generally, Archer, Dryad should be good enough, and then even Bear for Rejuve, so that you can do something on the ground as well. AP will help as well, because Dragonhawk Rush always stays tier 2 against Night Elf, because they cannot win late game. So you can actually make AP, and they will not have Cloud. So your base defenses will work. Phoenix, yeah, kill the egg. So that's how to counter Human with most races. Undead counters Dragonhawk with Fiends and Destroyers, which cannot get shackled. I think that's mostly it. So that's how to kill Human. That's how to counter Human pretty much. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll do another race next time if you like and subscribe. I have seen some people aren't subscribed to the channel. So definitely subscribe, and then I'll do another race next. See ya!